Hey guys, so here are our notes on genetics or heredity. Gregor Mendel is known as the father of genetics because he's the one that basically came up with it. Before Gregor Mendel came along, we didn't know why people looked like their parents, and he's the one that figured all of that out. He's the one that figured out heredity or inheritance, which is the passing on of characteristics or traits from parents to offspring. Now, back then, nobody knew what DNA was or genes were or anything like that. Not even Mendel knew about DNA, but he did know that there was something inside of our cells that carried information and it transferred from parent to offspring. So Mendel used pea plants to do his experiments because pea plants grew really fast and they also had different traits, just like we have different traits like our hair color and eye color and things like that. Pea plants had the same thing, and it was really easy for him to decide who the mom plant was going to be and the dad plant was going to be, and then he would plant the seeds and see what the offspring looked like. These are the different traits that the pea plants had. Some of them were the seeds were round or wrinkled. They were different colors. The pea pods were different colors. The flowers were different colors. The pea pods were different shapes. And one of the things that gets referred to most often is the size of the plants. Some of them would grow really tall and some of them would stay short. And those are the different traits that Mendel looked at. And he said, okay, well, you know what? I'm going to take a tall mom and a short dad and see what the offspring look like. And it involved a lot of math and a lot of percentages because he would look at the offspring and say, well, 25% turned out like this and 75% turned out like this. And so he knew what the chances were of what the kids were going to look like, what the offspring was going to look like. So here's some of our traits. It's important to know that what Mendel figured out was that some traits are dominant and some of them are recessive, which means that some of them traits are stronger and some of them are weaker. If one parent passes on the dominant trait, the kid is going to show the dominant trait. A lot of people ask me like, ma'am, how come I have straight hair, but both of my parents have curly hair? Well, that's because you are carrying a trait that is recessive. If you look back at your ancestors, like your grandparents or your great grandparents, chances are they have the same hair as you, but your parents aren't showing that trait. For example, like my mom has dark colored eyes. Dark colored eyes are dominant, and my dad has light colored eyes, which are recessive. It's the weaker trait. The only way that I would end up with light colored eyes is if my dad passed on the trait for light colored eyes and my mom passed on the trait for light colored eyes, but she didn't. She passed down the trait for dark colored eyes, so I ended up with dark colored eyes. But I know I'm carrying the light colored trait from my dad, so there is a possibility that I could pass it down to my kids. But the only way that the kids are going to end up with those light colored eyes is if their dad also passes down that trait. That's the only way that the recessive trait wins, is if both parents pass it down. If one of the parents passes down the dominant trait, then that's the one that wins, and the kid's going to have show the dominant trait, but they're still carrying the recessive trait, so their kids could have it. Okay, so that's an important thing to know. That's one thing that Mendel also figured out. So DNA, we've talked about DNA before. It's in the nucleus of a cell, and this is where the genes are at. This is what's carrying the information in the form of chromosomes. And so if we look at these chromosomes even closer, we would see that DNA double helix that I had in the very, very first slide. But to sum up, remember that heredity is these traits getting passed down from our parents, and that's what inheritance is, or heredity is, and that's the most important thing that you learn today from this presentation. Okay, if you have any questions, let me know, and I will see you guys in class.